Kia ora ana koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. I will open the Economic Development Committee meeting for Wednesday the 7th of October. And I understand that there are health and safety considerations that will be projected on the screen since we're all back in the chamber today. Just a reminder about fire and emergency, any alarms we leave via the nearest exit, and just make sure we know that with some of the changes here in this particular chamber. The assembly point remains the clock tower on the square. Health and safety, no smoking near or in the building. A defibrillator is located in the link span, and any issues, please report that to the committee staff. Item number 1 for our committee is apologies. I have an apology from Mr. Karaitiana. Are there any further apologies? Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Chair, I just early departure possibly on council business to Wellington if we're still going.
Thank you. Don't seem to be any others, so I will move the receipt of those, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Any discussion? There being none, I'll invite you to vote. Thank you. That is carried unanimously. I'll now adjourn the Economic Development Committee until the adjournment of the Infrastructure Committee and hand over to Councillor Dennison.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd now like to open the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 7th of October and call for apologies.
Mr. Chair, same as previous, if we're still going
Thank you.
On council business. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move those. Seconded by Councillor Meehan. Call for a vote. That is passed unanimously. Thank you. In relationship to the order of business today, we're going to take item 5, which is a presentation from Soho Group, and then adjourn to the conclusion of the Economic Committee to deal with the balance of the business. So item 5, I'd like to welcome to the table Sam Wallace, who's the Managing Director of Soho Group, and they are nearing completion a multi-storey housing development in Pioneer Highway. And just wanted to acknowledge the office manager, Emma Jackson, who's joining him from Auckland today. Welcome, Sam. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor Dennison, for the opportunity to talk to everyone today. Sounds like you're all excited to be back in your big chambers building, so it's good news for you guys. So yeah, I run and manage Soho Group, which for those who haven't picked up is a mix of social housing. That's how you get Soho. So we're a spin-off of Wallace Development Company, who have been based in Palmerston North for a couple of decades now, done a bit of work. So our focus at this time was to assist with the increasing of the public housing supply throughout the country, especially in the regions where Kāinga Ora doesn't have much of an impact. Their focus is mainly on Auckland, so as regional developers we could come in and step in and fill that void. Now, we work with community housing providers, which are the regulated sector of the tenancy managers. They're pretty heavily audited each year to provide a good service to the tenants. So it's a very sensitive area, of course, so they're under quite a heavy watch to do a good job. We don't really consider ourselves a development company. We think of ourselves as an asset management company with the ability to develop. That's because we own the properties we build, and we own them for a very long time. And so having the ability to develop gives us the property that we need and the CHIP needs to provide the best service for the tenants, because that's who, after all, that's why we're trying to satisfy, is to make sure that people that are in motels and cars actually get warm, safe, dry places to live. So when we finish a project like our one in Church Street, you know, it's a 20-year commitment from Soho, not just us coming in, building something and getting out. So we design and build the property with that in mind, that we are here for the long term, which is what we've done. So just first, on public housing in general is pretty contentious and political. Everyone's hearing all the political parties going hammer and tongs on their policies to fix the need, and I certainly think it's not going to be solved until the supply side economics are solved. And I think most of you on the Infrastructure Committee will understand, and as I was discussing with Mayor Smith earlier today, that the infrastructure needs to be put in place before you can just start putting in housing. You know, how can we keep providing housing when the stormwater networks are already tapped out, for example? I mean, I know that should be pretty topical, and things like why we can't use building products that are registered in Australia but not UK but not in New Zealand also increases supply. For us, the process for the resource consent in Palmerston North was long, in all honesty. It was 63 working days, mainly on 2 points, that we were the first of its kind in Palmerston North, so the planners and urban designers and infrastructure engineers needed time to digest what we're actually doing, which is understandable. Coupled with the RMA being complicated at the same time, really pushes out that time frame. I think now when we focus on next projects, and now that councils are getting more experience in medium density housing, this process should be sped up. But you know, I would like to see that continuously improve going forward. If you are wanting to provide housing, you are want quality outcomes, that's a decent area for councils to target, is that resource consent process. Know what you want, know how to support it to get there. There was 457 RFIs now building consent. I don't really have a comment on that. I just wanted to say it to everyone so everyone knew. But our investment in Palmerston North, for Soho Group's perspective, is obviously our property in Church Street, which is 46 dwellings over 5 blocks. We found this site to be on Google Earth. There was 5 pretty under-maintained homes on those sites, on large sites, so we amalgamated them and increased the density. We've been working with Iowa's Construction, who have just been incredible. They're an amazing construction team, and we certainly use them again at a drop of a hat. I think they've just done an amazing job. I think you notice on that project, there was never a crane on site. There was never a large tower crane or a crawler crane putting the building together. So it's all developed and made out of wood. We had Xland timber from when it was in Nelson, and timber framing from Carter's. So removing that crane cost was a real innovation for us. I mean, you pay for a crane at night when you're not using it, and you've got to pay for 2 people to operate it. So removing that cost actually increased the speed as well. And I think that's going to be a great focus about how to speed up housing going forward, is to be like, okay, what can we get made already that's pre-made? You can get walls, floors, roof trusses. They can all be put up with a HIAB. They all turn up on one truck. They get put up with that HIAB on the back of that truck. That's the area that we've found with Church Street, because we tested it on Church Street and it's worked amazingly well. And that also has pretty positive environmental impacts as well. Concrete is 6% of the Earth's human-made global emissions. Steel is about 7%. So if we're reducing reliance on concrete and steel and putting it back onto wood, regenerative products, that has a better environmental impact. So I think that was my main point on the design and the actual bones of the structure, because I know councils going through their own building processes, and you see other developers. I think encouragement towards prefabricated wooden products would certainly help increase the supply and the speed of the supply as well. And it's something we've learned that's been a real positive out of this project, and we've rolled it on to all of our other projects. We're looking forward to the end result. We can't wait for tenants to move in. It's going to be 4th of February next year when we get CCC. So we're looking forward to that date. I think, you know, people are often a bit standoffish at first about the model we're producing here, because it gets coupled up with emergency housing, transitional housing, transient housing. But in reality, we are creating long-term rentals under the public housing model, so we expect the tenants to live there for very long times and become quite acquainted with them. And we want to be judged after this project's been done for a year, 2 years, 3 years, about the job we've done, not just straight away. So we are looking forward to it being open and managing the property well and showing that it is a good model for the city and regional cities as well. The future ideas of Soho is quite exciting. So we've got this good expertise of how to build medium density housing in regions. We can build them quick, we can build them to Homestar 6 and LifeMark 4 and 5, we can build them fast, and we're focusing on the CHIP housing for the medium term, because that's just the model we're operating under. We've got everything set up. But I think beyond that and looking at the horizons, there's two avenues we want to be taking as a company. And first is the build-to-rent models and the affordable housing models as well, and how they look. So that's where we're going to be heading to, is we can create and build these assets now, we can manage them. Now, how else do we make them work in definitely the low and medium sectors of society where the greatest demand is needed for the most? So that's where we'll get into, and I think with our next project that we're looking into, that will be, so that's smaller than Church Street. That's the model we're going to be running. So it's not always just going to be the public housing for Soho, but it will come into housing in general as well, which is something we're really, really looking forward to. Coupled with this is that we've got to focus on civic development as well, but that's more inclusive of how do we do residential, retail, office, all in one big building, with big block development as well, and taking great examples from a city like Vienna and places in Sweden as well, which have got amazing examples of how medium density works really well in city centres, coupled with compliant and other offices and uses. That just works really well. So going forward, I think that's going to be a big vision for us. I won't see my orange lights on. Look, we like Palmerston North as a company. I was born and raised up in Jekyll Street, which is a few k's down the road, and we can see growth in the Palmerston region. It's got a stable base, it's got its agriculture, it's got its airport, it's got some big offices here, and we can certainly foresee that it's got good growth out of the regional centres in the country, which a lot are actually quite lacking. And Soho, I think, wants to be a part of that growth going forward with developments. So we've started with Church Street. We're looking forward to our next project as well. And we're looking forward to being involved with council in a collaborative manner after that. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Sam. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes, I am.
Great. Open it up. Councillor Bowen.
First cab off the rank. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sam, for coming in to speak to us. I think lots of us have been watching what's going on there with interest. I just wanted to follow up on the points you're making about working with council to get this development up. Obviously, 63 working days to get consent is not ideal. And the 450-odd RFI. So I suppose my question is, would that be as bad again if you had to do it again? Has there been learning on both sides, do you think, about how to do this, and what learning have you taken away as a business?
There's certainly going to be learnings on both sides, and I think the next process will be a lot better. We did start the process off a couple months before with pre-app meetings and really got stuck in. Again, it is a lot for council to take in a 46 three-level unit development in town, so I think we've broken the back of that process, and we'll have similar designs now, similar plans, similar consultants. We'll know what council are looking for in terms of the key points, relationships to streets, neighbourhoods, access off the street, straight off the street into units, all those sort of small points that make a good development. We're aware of that, and we took the learnings onto our next project. So they slowly speed up and speed up. So yeah, it was a long time. We knew it was always going to be difficult, and we planned for it. But I do hope council learnt at the same time as well, because they're going to be seeing a lot more of these style developments coming across their desk, because it is going to be the trend of how to get more houses. So it is a long process. We've certainly learned from it. I do hope council have learned from the experience too.
Good. And to follow up, obviously you've done this project in Palmerston North, but you're working regionally and across the nation. So how does our requirements here to do this kind of development compare with other developments that you've got going?
Yeah, well, it's the same. We keep running into the same constraints that all councils have, which is the infrastructure, which used to be the reliance on cars as well, which are 2 points that are being worked through. So that's the same thread. I mean, all councils are now open to new ideas to increase the housing supply, and all are doing a lot to update their urban design guidelines, or have their own design guidelines as well. And I think that process is going to get better and better. Palmy Council in particular, very open, and they had a lot of input into the project, which is what we want. We want council to buy into it, to feel like they actually have a part of it, to pass it through. And I think that's important as well. I must say Rebecca Kinlock did a really good job being our liaison through that period. It wasn't easy for her as well because it was sort of out of her hands. So having a liaison like Rebecca was extremely helpful to help us through that process. So I think with the liaison, with developing your own urban design guidelines, I think you can continuously improve with the service you provide.
Thank you for that. Thanks, Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, and thanks for your presentation, and it's really exciting actually to hear. Can you tell us if you're planning more of these developments in Palmerston North? I realise there might be some commercial sensitivity around it, but generally?
We've just got plans. I got them through at 5:30 last night when I said I was meeting the mayor this morning, so I gave the architect a bit of a hurry up. But we're planning one 18-unit development quite close to here, which will be 18 units, 3 levels. So obviously a smaller size than Church Street, but that was a part of a wider view for us. We wanted to provide 100 units for the CHIP so they can start up an office here and have enough staff and enough units to justify having a proper workforce here. So yes, we've got one more in the pipeline.
Okay, and who are you working with for your CHIP?
That's Compass Housing New Zealand. So Bernadette Pennell is the general manager of that. She is very experienced, and she's certainly one of our most professional and commercial CHIPs that we work with. A lot are fairly lightweight and not overly skilled, but Compass gives us the most assurance that they'll do a fantastic job.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Sam. Yeah, really good to hear what's happening there. A couple questions, if I might. One was just to understand the ongoing energy efficiency of the build in Church Street. You talked a little bit about the construction materials being energy efficient and that sort of stuff, but in terms of the ongoing, how well is it insulated? How efficient is it going to be?
So part of our design was to beat the building code, do better than the building code in a lot of areas, because the building code's okay. It gets by, but it's nothing compared to where the German building code is or other countries. So, and the main points were obviously the heat insulation. So, not relying on heaters to warm yourself up, not have draft as a healthy homes, but also have proper ventilation as well. So in the summer, you get that cooling. So they are important parts for us, so you're not relying on the expensive energy bills to heat and cool the properties, double glazing, etc. sort of standard. Focus for us is obviously fire is very important for us as well. Having that many units in one area, fire becomes a massive focus point, as it should be. And you've seen recent events overseas which demands better fire protection for tenants. But in the energy efficiencies, I think that insulation standards will go a long way into meaning there's less reliance on the electricity. We decided not to put gas into the project, instead of running everything off electric. Church Street was unfortunately the last project we did without solar panels. We'll put solar panels on the roofs of all our projects going forward, so the next project will have solar panels as well. So that just means the tenants just don't have to pay as much of their income on electricity, which is important because they pay enough on their rent. So that is a key focus for us, and we're going to try and get better and better at it.
Oh, cool, thanks. So you referred to some certification schemes that are available around energy efficiency of builds. Did you opt into one of those for the Church Street development, or is that?
Again, the Church Street meets Homestar 6.
Okay.
We've only started after that. We go through iterations of getting more switched on about how we build things. So our latest projects are official Homestar 6, LifeMark rated healthy homes. These homes are still the rated, we're just not going through the official process. So we hit all the benchmarks, but at the time the paperwork was just too slow, it was going to hold us up, too costly.
Cool.
So yeah, Homestar LifeMark is our benchmark.
Great, thanks. And the final question I had was just trying to, I guess, understand the context of 63 days and not wanting to labor the point too much, but you sort of, like, from the total time frame of, like, say, property acquisition through to when the 4th of Feb actually arrives, like, what's the total time frame of the development so that I can understand how big that 63 days sits within that?
So we put the property under contract, I think it was November 2018.
Okay.
So we started the pre-act process then. I think we for about January for resource consent, February, and then that process went to June or something. So but that stage is really just a holding cost stage for us. So we just got to pay interest on the land, on the debt we have on the land,
Yeah.
which is a cost you don't necessarily factor in
Yes.
if it keeps growing out.
Yeah. But in this case, then overall, it was sort of a couple years.
In a couple of years,
And it's 2 months in a couple of years.
it is. Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
that's helpful to know.
Yeah, so it's not obviously, but it's longer than the 20 working days
Yes.
as the guideline.
Understood.
But yeah, in the grand scheme of things, you forget about it once it's done.
Thanks, Sam. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's fantastic what you're doing. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
One last question. You're moving away from traditional products into wood. In the long term, how does that affect your maintenance?
Buildings can be built out of wood for a long time, and obviously that is a big concern for us, but what is also improving with using the wooden structure is the claddings and the waterproofing systems that go on top of it. So if you are using the wood, you've got to make sure that your design is capable of being structurally tight and waterproof. That's where you'll get the deficiencies. So working pretty closely with James Hardy to ensure that the RAD boards on and then the cladding system works really well. So we are protecting that wood. But yes, you are right, there is that concern that, it's not concrete. It might not last as long. But you've got to look at it outside of it. What are we protecting that wood in from the outside and the inside as well?
Because a lot of time, with wooden buildings, sort of 10, 15 years later, you're getting, they sort of look a bit tired compared to brick and things like that. So,
well, the outside is, we've got brick on the ground floor and linear above as our cladding, and it's our responsibility under our leasing documentation to do a building wash and gutter clean every year, and then paint them every 10 years. So we think by doing those two things, they should look really good, as well as upkeeping the landscaping as well.
yep, no, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Sam, for the wonderful presentation. I have two questions. I appreciate that you have reduced the cost by ignoring the crane use. And was there any comparison or any record of the minor incidents or accidents as far as the workers are related by not using cranes and doing heavy lifting?
Oh, look, that's a very interesting point, and it'd be interesting to know if there are any changes. We keep every week we get a contractor's report with any injuries. I think there's been a sprained thumb, and that might have been Cameron Isles himself spraining his thumb. So it's a really interesting point, but it'll be good to see if that actually correlates, because people are actually helping the high ab, lifting it down and then tilting it up as well. I'm not sure, so it would be the
All right, thank you. Second question is, how do you compare the prices of these units with the other units available in the town?
Well, it's interesting because we build these properties with the intention of leasing them out as public housing from the start. So we did get rental comparisons done as just a market evaluation, and our units were evaluated to come between the middle and the top end is where they put them. So they weren't quite hitting the top end of what you could achieve at market rental, but you're above the medium as well. So we slotted into that bracket.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sam, can you just outline the mix of configuration of the rooms? Are they studio, one bedroom, two bedroom, just to get an idea what sort of provision that you're making?
There's about a 50-50 split of 2 bedrooms to 1 bedroom. So there's 5, and there are 5 blocks. There's a 1-storey block, there's 2 2-storey blocks, 2 3-storey blocks. So there's a mix of 1 and 2s. We've asked to provide 1 and 2 bedroom units from the Ministry of Housing, because that's the greatest need. Not many free market people build 1 and 2 bedroom units because you make more money building 3 and 4. So that's where the lack of suppliers, so that's where we come in. That's what we build, and I believe that's what council are also building for themselves as well. So there's that mix, and that's really important because you've got to understand a certain type of people that fit into a 1 and 2 bedroom unit. Single mothers, elderly people, people with children, a lot of men on their own. So you've got to think, all right, now we're building these 1 and 2 bedroom units. how do we make the tenant cohort fit with the sort of people that fit inside those units. So we've been asked to provide those units, now working with Compass to understand what's going to be the best mix of people to ensure it's a good environment to live in.
Great. Is there any shared common areas where residents can?
There's common laundries just for people to use in case they don't have their own washing and dryer. But there's outdoor seating areas that we're providing, which will be nice landscaped areas for people to sit and use. There's sort of things called intentional friction, where you get people to walk past each other, create laneways for people to brush past and actually have human contact with people. So that's all part of the landscaping design as well, to encourage people to talk to neighbours and actually get a neighbourly feel. I mean, not many people in Palmy are going to be living in an area like this before, so they need to be sort of encouraged and educated about how to make it work in an environment like that. And I think communal areas are going to be helpful towards that.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sam. Thank you for coming down from Auckland today. I know you've got other business, and thank you, Emma, for joining. It's good to meet you both. And thank you for your investment in our city.
Fantastic.
And I say ours, you're a homeboy too, and realising that housing is such a big issue across the country. And we do have a late question just come in, actually. Thank you, Councillor Hapera.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Sam. Just on that community space, in your other models across other regions, have you had much request for community space and much demand around that?
Not particularly. We get asked to provide on-site offices for the CHIP that can be used as a consultation room, an area for tenants to have a chat to the tenancy manager, just so it's private. We get asked to provide outdoor spaces, but indoor spaces, no, it hasn't been one of the key metrics for people to provide.
Okay. It's just something that we're grappling with, so it's just interesting to hear what you have to say. So
do you think it's a positive thing to include?
I think it is, but I think we're grappling with it, so it's interesting to hear what you have to say from your opinion. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor. And again, just a repeat of saying thank you for making the visit down today and including a presentation to our council. Thank you for your investment, and yeah, we look forward to the 4th of February.
Me too. Thank you very much, guys.
Great,
Cheers.
thank you. Councillors, I'll move the recommendation to receive the presentation. Councillor Hapera seconds. Open it up for any comment. If there's anyone wishing to make any comment on this item. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think this has been a great presentation, and speaking to Sam earlier this morning, hopefully as a council we'll be able to go and have a look through this facility. Yes, there's been some issues around the consent, but I think put it in perspective, it's the first time that this apartment type block has been developed in Palmerston North. It's 46 apartments. Put that into perspective, 46 homes or smaller homes. Yes, you're probably going to get those amount of questions, but I'm sure that the second time we have this application that it will go better. I'm sure of that. Look, there are many great positives for the city here. It's addressing a real housing need for this city and our people from a commercial developer that has a social conscience. That's quite evident. So thank you, Sam, and your company. I think some interesting things that came through around the design, made of wood. That's really interesting, with minimal use of steel and concrete. The design, the Homestar rating, real positives there. So I think it's also the model of build to rent, where long-term ownership from the developer, the government contract, and then having an experienced CHIP or community housing provider like Compass Housing looking after the tenants' needs in that tenant base. So I think a real positive for the city. I encourage more of this, and thank you, Sam, for speaking to us today.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, just to echo the Mayor's words, really, I'm very pleased to see this happening, given that we all know the rate at which the social housing waiting list is climbing in Palmerston North. But there are some particular aspects of this that have been considered that I think are worthy of just really noting. And one in particular is the need to make this successful socially. So it's not just about building a house and putting someone in, but it's also making the mix of tenants work to make sure that there's adequate support for tenants through an experienced community housing provider. And I think it's the whole package. I won't say it's easy to build houses, because obviously it's not, but you know, building houses is only one aspect of this. It's got to be a successful experience for people living there, for the neighbours, for the city. And I really had confidence from the way that Sam described it, that a lot of thought has gone into this, and I'm looking forward to seeing a number more coming to Palmerston North, so very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just think this is fantastic for the city. And when you think that there's 500 people on our waiting list and there's 46 homes here, that, you know, that's 10%. And with what the council's doing with Papiar, there'll be more houses coming online. I mean, Palmerston North is working with private, government and council is leading the way in housing, and I think there'll be certainly some more coming on board. So in a couple of years' time, I'm hoping that we've sorted this housing issue in Palmerston.
Thank you. No further comments? There being none, I invite you to vote. That's passed unanimously. We'll now adjourn this meeting to the conclusion of the Economic Development Committee meeting, and we'll just have a couple minutes just to exchange seats. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. We're resuming the Economic Development Committee meeting, and we move to item number 2, which is notification of additional items. I'm not aware of any. No. Item number 3, any declarations. Again, I'm not aware of any declarations. No, so we'll move to item number 4, which is public comment. And we do have a public comment this morning from Sean. So, Sean Kay, if you'd like to come forward, and you have 3 minutes to use as you wish.
Good morning. I'll make this quick. COVID-19 has affected all sectors in our communities, from micro to large businesses, corporations around the world, to here on our streets in Palmy. Week before and during COVID lockdown, I heard the pleas and cries from all business sectors, and just not the arts sector. So in turn, it inspired me not to sit by, but to take a stand with the rebounds of post-lockdown. From listening and being active in post-lockdown is to host a night market with partnering with Palmy Unleashed and downtown Palmerston North. I had planned the downtown winter night market due to level 2 alert level. This got postponed in August. Now, the Colours of Spring Blossom Night Market. The market is a community platform to enable vendors to on-sell their wares, produce and products. The market through invoices pays 8 locals for their services. The cherry on top enables the businesses within the downtown complex and surrounding businesses on Broadway to be involved in a promotional event to capture trade and sales. The downtown Colours of Spring night market will host over 30 vendors, utilise the food business, the street eatery, and downtown will allow free car parking. Palmy Unleashed funding is $1,362. The downtown in-kind support has so far reached $1,802 and more to come from them. And other in-kind support from our community is $1,900. Just to note, we are always on the ground on our social media pumping at locals, be local, make the town go round. If, for example, if someone buys a hamburger, there's over about 5 other businesses gaining from that one hamburger. With the market social media platform, over 28,000 people have interacted with our page. So this is a well-needed venture and partnering on the streets to make this happen. The locals are wanting it, and so are most of the businesses. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Sean. We do. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Sean, for coming to talk to us about the market, and well done for getting that back up again after being put off last time. I just wondered if you see this as a potentially regular event in downtown?
This is going to be a trial. People are loving the concept. It's the same concept that we did in George Street with the Village Night Market. So with Palmy Unleashed mandate is a one-off funding, but we have talked to other locals in downtown, and we are looking at doing it so we can stand our own 2 feet with downtown backing us.
Excellent, thank you.
Right, there are no further questions. Thank you, Sean. And just for everyone's benefit, I think, Sean, you've dropped a reminder in front of each elected member, so I'm sure that'll be circulated as well. But thanks for coming to speak this morning.
Thank you for your time.
Members, I'll move the receipt of the public comment, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Is there any discussion? Councillor Bowen.
Thank you. I just wanted to draw attention to the figures that Sean skated through really quickly there to show that partnership working of council putting money in, but that being matched by the host business and also by community partners. And that was very much in our thinking when we started the Palmy Unleashed model, that it shouldn't just be council doing stuff to people, but it should be council responding to a need in the community and enabling other people to get involved. So I'm just really interested to see how this goes as a trial, to see if that small investment from council can turn into something that delivers longer term vibrancy in that area of the city.
Thank you. There are no further comments, so we'll now put this to the vote. That is carried unanimously. Move to item number 5, which is a presentation from the Manawatu Chamber of Commerce and the Palmy bid. So I'd like to invite Rob Campbell and Amanda Lindsley to the table. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
And you've got 10 minutes, over to you.
Fantastic, thank you. Lovely to see you all again. It seems like almost a lifetime since we were here last, but such is the nature of the year, I guess. The presentation today is really just to pick up where we last left off, and I think when we last spoke to the Economic Development Committee, we were considering the strategic plan and working on our promotional plan. So let's kick into it. I don't think it'll be 10 minutes, so there'll be plenty of time for questions as we head through. If I can get the clicker to work. The on button. Thank you very much. So the strategic plan has been finalised. Our vision is that Palmy bid be recognised as the best regional city bid. A reminder, there are sort of upwards of 45 or 50 bids around the country, so it's quite a common structure. We want to be the best in a comparable city. Our mission, Palmy bid will create a vibrant, connected CBD where businesses can feel heard and supported, where they can thrive and where they genuinely want to be. And I think the word community is one that we use a lot, and it's certainly all the positive connotations from that description is what we want to achieve. This really needs to be by the community, of the community, for the community. Our key deliverables, we want to advocate for business interests, providing representation for and within the CBD. And we have started along that path. We've been actively involved in the streetscape design, and particularly the Square East redevelopment that happened over recent months. We're currently preparing a presentation for both Palmy and Horizons Council in relation to the redesign of the bus system, which the CBD has a significant interest in. And we're also commencing some work in relation to earthquake strengthening, which is happening at the moment as well. We want to focus on business growth and retention through marketing, events and public relations. A key plank in terms of our deliverables is business support, focusing on safety and crime prevention. Feedback from our community is that something is desirable, and they want our input to you and other organisations around the city to make sure that is as good as it can be. We also want to serve as a vehicle for connecting the community. Just a quick note on the boundary, which has had a little bit of tinkering in recent months. The ring road remains the outer limit, but properties on the outside of the ring road are now included. That wasn't initially envisaged. Broadway and Main Street up to around about Vivian Street has been included in the boundary. That was always the case, although Main Street is a late addition. We feel that the businesses and properties in those areas are similar to the general CBD, with a mix of hospitality, retail, professional and personal services. We just feel it fits. We've taken a decision to exclude residential property from being rated and charged, simply because we felt that the minimum charges that we were looking to raise were significant in relation to the rates already being paid by residential property owners. We still intend to engage and invite residential property owners in participation in the bid community, but they'll receive that participation gratis. Voting. We're under starters orders, and voting will be by online and by mail. Online for businesses that we have email contact addresses for. There are a number of landlords that we only have mail addresses for, and they'll be invited to mail their vote. The voting register is 90% complete. Might even be a little bit more than that now. Very good. The vote anticipated by the end of November, and at worst early December. We expect to meet the deadline for inclusion of the bid in the long-term plan. So the marketing plan, we have an online register. We will have that will allow businesses to verify their inclusion in the bid boundary. We'll commence email and direct mail communications. And we will establish a Facebook group that would allow all community members to engage with each other and with us. That'll be manned 24/7 during the promotional period leading up to the vote. There'll be at least one town hall type meeting, but probably 2 drop-in days where we'll establish a desk somewhere in the CBD and allow businesses to come and meet with the committee and ask questions. Just sort of recognising that some businesses can't get to a single town hall meeting at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. They need to be flexible, and so do we. There'll be a flyer drop, and we've already commenced personal visits to key landlords and businesses around the CBD, just really to engage with them direct and make sure that they're positive on moving forward. Marketing plan will commence in full probably on the 19th of October. We'll allow the election to settle down, and hopefully then the community can focus on what we're trying to bring to them. So final thoughts. There's been a lot of discussion over the last couple of months around the impact from COVID, and we have considered an option to delay the launch because of the additional economic stress that our rate or additional rate may cause. The final decision was made to push ahead because we figured uncertainty levels will be higher, not lower in a year. We figure we need to play with the circumstances we have rather than risk perhaps are more concerned 12 or 24 months from now. Initial reactions have been positive with those larger value property owners, at least, notwithstanding that there are some current concerns around the economic outlook. I have to say, no one's sort of hugging me and saying, thanks, Rob, for charging me any more money. But most are positive about the positivity, about the benefits that bid can provide to the CBD. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Robert and Amanda. Question, Councillor Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob and Amanda. I'm just wondering, we've just launched some city identity branding, and considering that the bid isn't live as such, I wondered if there'd been any conversations around including some of that to sort of tie in with the work that the city's doing as a whole.
Yes, with the branding, we have been speaking with council about that, and indeed they saw our branding way before that the Palmy was actually designed. So we feel that as well, the whole rationale around the Palmy bid branding was that it did work well with all the other brandings that the city had at the time. We think that the Palmy branding fits that as well. So yes.
Certainly, I have to say the new city branding we find exciting, and we think it's complementary with what we're doing.
Yeah, we do.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to the bid levy that's going to be applied to the businesses to contribute, is there, what sort of scope are we talking about, the annual contribution?
It will vary significantly, Councillor, depending on a number of factors. There's a fixed rate and also a variable rate based on the capital value of the property, and so that will mean there's a wide range depending on the value. But the bid should, the rate should relate to the economic value being created by the property, and therefore we think that's equitable. Beneath that, though, there will be a variable distribution, because within some buildings, for instance, there may be 5 or 6 tenancies, and so individual businesses will share based on the average occupancy of each particular building. So it's designed to be as equitable as possible, but there are a wide range of outcomes depending on the nature of the businesses and the nature of the properties involved.
Just to reiterate as well some of the things that Rob did mention earlier, we've got over 700 businesses on the database at the moment, and that's outside of the landowners, and the majority of those have been visited by the team. The Facebook group is actually established. Rob mentioned as well earlier that we have questioned whether we should delay, and at the end of the day, it wasn't the agencies or the people necessarily on the committee who made the decision to go ahead. It was actually, we went and asked the people who were directly going to be affected by this, and they asked us to go ahead. So, I mean, what we're doing, I guess, is that we're giving opportunity and choice, and so that we can work as a collective and a collaborative. So it's just giving people the choice to make their decision themselves.
Just by way of an indication, although there is a wide range of outcomes, we think the vast majority of businesses will probably be facing a levy of $200 perhaps per annum, and a lot will be less than that.
Okay.
But there are a wide range of outcomes.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Rob, and thanks, Amanda. Just, I realise your focus right now is on the sort of engagement and the voting process. Sort of, I guess, not wanting to presume a favourable outcome of that, but thinking about sort of hitting the ground running, if that is approved, sort of, what's the sort of forward plan around that side of things, so that once you get the result, you can sort of really get into it?
Well, we actually are on the ground and operating, I think, with the help of the Chamber. We've been active in the community, but we will continue to sort of maintain that presence. If we get a favourable result, we won't be funded until July next year. And then we'll start to beef it up with the employment of staff and rollout of the strategies that we've talked about. So, but there will be a sort of on the ground presence and a minimal presence that the Chamber's provided up until then.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Robin and Amanda. That concludes questions. So thanks for the update. We all know that this committee at its last meeting effectively recommended the approval of the policy, and so it's been really helpful getting an update given the current circumstances as to where the bid is, and I appreciate that the team have been working with council officers as well.
I have to say, I hadn't mentioned it, but thank you to David and Keegan, who have been extremely good to work with.
I wasn't saying that just because he was sitting next to me. It was just an acknowledgement of...
Looking at me rather sternly, I don't know.
All right. Thank you. Members, I will move that the presentation be received. That'll be seconded by Councillor Dennison. Is there any discussion? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Amanda. Another really positive presentation this morning, I think, especially for our CBD. Be fair to say that it is vulnerable in these challenging times, especially for the retail and commercial sector. And I think with COVID, and we just don't know where that's going to head, the need for a coordinated voice, marketing themes and outcomes for the CBD is really important. We heard that 700 businesses, landlords, will be voting, which effectively for an extra rate, which they then have the choice of where that can be spent to promote the CBD and their wider business sector. I think again is really positive. So I look forward to seeing where this all goes. But thank you for the work, and I know this has all been extra on top of everything else you do in your daytime job, so appreciate the extra work that you're putting in. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments, so we'll now vote on this. That is carried 15 in favour with 1 abstention. We'll now move to item number 6, which is a presentation from CEDA. Linda Stewart, the CE, good morning.
Morena.
So you have 10 minutes, over to you.
You should have a presentation, I hope. Otherwise I'll be freestyling. Okay, Morena, we've got quite a bit to get through this morning, so it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind, so take notes and hopefully we'll get a bit of detail in the Q&A, because there's a lot happening in this space within the city. Inward investment and business attraction is a priority area of focus for us, and we approach it very much aligned to our 3 big goals, which you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. I'd also acknowledge that it's very positive that the newly adopted strategic positioning of the city is as well in line with these goals, which is great news. We're all beginning to pull behind a very, very similar long-term objective for Palmerston North. We all have limited resources, so it's important that we use them very, very effectively. We have to know who we're targeting and for what purpose. The key thing here is that we are influencing, as a group, commercial decision making. So front of mind has to be, how does investing in our city support organisations to achieve their long-term strategic goals? And we also have to be very honest about what the barriers or weaknesses to that proposition are and how we might overcome them. You'll note in the paper I did touch on some research that we undertook as part of another project, but through Colmar Brunton we interviewed 116 businesses across the country, across a range of sectors right across New Zealand. This is used to help us formulate not just our strategy, but how we develop the value proposition for the city, not through our perceptions, but through businesses' feedback about what supports their decision making. Businesses tend, by and large, to invest in regions that they already have a presence in, that are well aligned to their strategies, or have complementarities, so sectors that are aligned to the one that they operate in. It's also key to note the importance of building familiarity with our city. What do existing businesses say about how easy it is to operate within the city? What are businesses that are elsewhere in New Zealand understanding of our support networks, our infrastructure, consents, developer levies, access to talent? So we need to build confidence in the marketplace that the city is a great place to invest. You'll note there the key factors or criteria in deciding where to invest, the ones that are in the top box. We personally probably believe that we do pretty well in those areas, and we'd probably say in the next kind of 5 as well that we do pretty well in there too. They're areas that we're all focused on. The views of investors are a little bit different, and some of that is just perception rather than reality, but perception for them is quite important. So from a potential investor perspective, connectivity, so the road and rail and air, are key drivers for investment in the city, but also the ability to provide a skilled workforce and also high quality telco, data and digital support. They view those latter two as perhaps not as obvious to them, that it might be a weakness for us as a city. And just some feedback from them verbatim, which is always really good to hear, not always what you want to hear, right enough, but it reinforces the strategic priorities that the City Council and organisations like CIRA have on the distribution hub, on the regional freight ring road, and also on Te Ahua Turanga as well. Lastly, on the research, I just wanted to highlight just how critical you all are in the factors that support investment and attracting it to the region. You'll note there that the third most important factor is an enabling council. So alongside the affordability, the cost of living, cost of doing business, you send the right signals or otherwise to investors as a great place to invest and do business. And that has to be something that we all propagate, and it has to be something that our business community also propagates. Just want to touch on a few of the big strategic, the long-term projects that I think are important to keep you up to speed with. The first of it is around our global agri-food hub goal and the Manawatu Agri-Tech strategy, which is one of our key levers to achieving that big goal. I want to reinforce that it's not just a strategy. We're well into the action plan. In fact, we're in year 3, and we do monitor and track the progress against these big goals that we'll highlight there. We can make sure that we circulate this because there's a lot of detail in there for you to digest. But to pull out a couple of the key metrics that are specifically relevant to this presentation is that investment comes in many forms. It's not purely investing in a new warehouse or bringing a business here. Investment comes into our business community through R&D grants. It comes through venture capital and angel investors. That 1.24 million last year is from local investors into local businesses. The 12.4 million is from investors across New Zealand and internationally into local companies. So investment comes here in many different forms, and it's important that we understand that and how we can support it. I'll not dwell hugely on this, but it is, well aligned to all of our strategic priorities for the city and for the, central New Zealand. We also as well should note how this plays to those drivers that investors are seeking and businesses that are already here to support and give them confidence on their investment in the city. The planning aspect of this and the role that the City Council plays cannot be, underdone, let's say. It's hugely significant to the long-term future, not just of the city, but much further afield. I would say this familiarity part is something that we all have to do more work on. The comms and the stakeholder engagement, both within the city and region, but further afield, central government, private investors, is crucial so that they can understand the true opportunity that lies in the city. One that you maybe don't know such a huge amount about is the Transforming Te Apiti project. We know we've got one of the hidden gems of New Zealand right on our doorstep, but how do we unlock that? This is where our work in attracting investment really intersects with our work in developing our visitor market, but also our environment, our quality of life, and as well supporting the aspirations of our iwi. Our work to date in this project has been wholly funded through the Provincial Growth Fund. And we're looking to develop Te Apiti into a cultural, environmental and educational visitor asset. Key to this is the development of the Old Gorge Road. It's likely that we would be seeking central government investment as a catalyst project to develop that, so air bridges, a sky bridge, but we do need to, understand who owns that road and how we manage it. And then also the development of an eco-sanctuary too. We're targeting philanthropic investment for this, so we have the business case and the economic case done for that. Said it would be a whirlwind. We're going, I promise. And then lastly, the benefits of this are significant. We're estimating about $40 million of regional economic benefit and 250 to 300 jobs as a result of this project. And then in the paper, I mentioned some of those that are well through our investment pipeline. And one I just really wanted to highlight today, because it hits a number of our boxes here from the city's strategic goals, is Huringa Energy. It's been 4 years in the making. CEDA's been involved in this project for the past 3 years. And Huringa recently secured $20 million in a grant from central government. We have partners involved in this, such as Waitoma, TIL and TR Group. And they're down to meet with Mayor Smith and your CE on Monday, I believe. It's well aligned as an investment to our distribution hub proposition and to your eco-city goals, as well as building on our innovation, tech, R&D strengths. The initiative will involve the installation of 8 hydrogen refuelling sites across New Zealand, of which, I'm nearly there, I promise, one more slide, of which the city is a priority for that. So that will be about approximately a $10 million investment into that refuelling. Job creation, we're a little bit unsure of right now, I'll be honest. And the vision, why here, they really note the key strengths of the city, not just in the distribution hub, but in our emphasis on renewable energy. They want to be aligned with that, and they want to be aligned with the commercial partners that we already have based here. And then lastly, because it's quite cool, I think, they're actually putting on a bit of a tour of a hydrogen fuel cell bus, and they're looking to have a temporary site here in Palmerston North as part of that roadshow to raise the profile of both their work, but also the future of public and heavy haulage transportation across New Zealand. Nearly on time, sorry, stretched it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. Just open now for questions. I'll start. You've mentioned iwi's role in this. What are some of the support opportunities for iwi as they currently stand or are in terms of supporting the role of attracting inwards investment?
We're working with Ruma, who unfortunately is not here, on the investment plans for Rangatani o Manawatu. They're particularly interested in the social procurement approaches that they can leverage through the likes of the Kiwi Rail investment. They're already working with the Alliance on Te Ahua Turonga, and that's something that they're focused on and we're focused on, is ensuring they have a seat at the table and are able to participate and leverage that from day one. Right through to the other end of the spectrum, when I mentioned Te Apiti, as well as obviously iwi being involved in the Te Apiti governance group, Rangatani have high aspirations in the visitor sector. So they're looking at that project as a catalyst, helping them develop their visitor sector businesses, their commercial offering along the river. Again, the City Council has been very important in investing in things like the eel feeding platform, which will support them kicking off their visitor sector businesses. We're also, through our STAP funding, providing funding to our tourism working group to help them develop that, the business case and the business plan to get their commercial opportunities up and running. So that's both investment into them, but an FTE, a portion to help facilitate and coordinate that over the next year. So there's a few different parts that they're intrinsically linked to.
Thanks. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Linda, for your presentation and appreciating how much ground you covered very quickly there. I was just a little bit interested in a comment right at the beginning where you talked about getting to grips with the barriers that we face. And obviously you've done a lot of work to identify barriers, but getting to grips sounded quite dynamic. So obviously what you're saying is it's not enough just to know what our barriers are. We have to do something about that, and I wondered if you could expand on that a bit for me.
Sure. I mean, some of the barriers are perceptions, but for individual investors, they're the reality. So there's a comms component in this that, you know, actually when it comes to some of the telco side of things, we're well advanced as a city, but there is a perception issue around that. We know that our talent pipeline is not as full or as robust as it could be, even though we have, you know, 3 tertiary institutions based here. So we've got more work there in attracting and retaining the right talent in the city. There's, you know, and it was interesting hearing the presentation earlier around how easy it is to do business. Some of our business community think that it is an exceptionally well-connected city and have exceptionally positive experiences of investing and growing their business here, and others don't. And we have to understand both why that is, and are they real issues, and what can we collectively do to overcome them? Because potential investors come through the City Council, they come through to CEDA, they also come through landowners and developers. And what kind of messages are those individuals giving to our business community? So it's really about continual improvement, building that familiarity and building our value proposition, and be really, really clear on some of those areas of weakness, what we're prepared to do about it and what perhaps we're not.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Linda, for the broad-ranging update. Just wanted to pick up around some of that final conversation around Hauranga and the hydrogen opportunities coming our way, sort of the needs to identify customers for that service, obviously throughout the country, but locally, and just wondering what CEDA's wanting to do or seeing themselves doing in terms of helping match customers with that opportunity.
It's a really important question because scale is the crux of the issue here. The Hauranga really needs enough partners to make this commercially viable. I mentioned that they are working with some of the fuel companies and working with the likes of TIL and TR on exactly that. But we have been facilitating discussions with the regional council, for example, to see what the opportunities are for a percentage of our public transport network to be moved over to this. And when we talk about scale, I'm not saying that we need 200 of the 300 fleet. We need about 11 buses to make this work. So there's that part of it, but we've also had Toyota at the table in the discussions for quite some time, not from a car perspective, but they have a lot of experience in approaching and building the demand for this from their work in Japan, so we're learning from there. But we have great big businesses based here in the heavy trucking industry. Andrew, the owner and director of Hauranga, are well networked into themselves. But we need the scale, so horizons are key for us here.
Thanks for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Linda. That concludes questions. If we can make the presentation available for circulation, members can have a look at that a little bit closer. But thank you.
Thank you.
I'll move the recommendation, which is to receive the presentation. That is seconded by Councillor Harpiter, Is there any discussion? Mr. Mayor.
Comment time. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, thanks, Linda, and thanks for the work that has been done there. I think this is about influencing the influencers as well. The CE and myself were just this morning talking to the Soho group, and it's just interesting that they are doing things out of the norm, because we've seen the commercial real estate sector, we've seen the banks, we've seen national economists and landowners go to the traditional models. So we need to influence the influencers, and I do think that media play a part in that, and I'm talking mainly the national media, about Palmerston North being a great place to invest in the Manawatu. Really good and interesting to hear the progress with Agritech, the Central New Zealand Distribution Hub, which obviously includes Kiwi Rail, but I'll put another plug in for the Ring Road, because the Kiwi Rail hub will not work efficiently without the connections of road and then air as well. Iwi, we touched on Iwi, and I think the Deputy Mayor or Chair commented on where they fit. They are already big in our city, probably a little bit under the radar in terms of property development. They own hundreds of millions of dollars of land in our wider CBD. Rangatane, Tūwharetoa, Ngāti Apia, and the 10th Trust via the Palmerston North Reserve Lands Trust. So really promising to see the issues of what people make investment onto, the transport or access to the city. I think we're well placed there. We're doing well. Could do better, but it's one of the top things that companies and organisations make investment decisions on. Digital, telco, uptake of fibre is strong in the city. 5G networked. Again, another positive for us. The labour and talent pool, I think all of New Zealand's going to have that competition for that. We're not alone there. But it's good to see council is seen as being enabling as well. So all in all, pretty positive. And in these challenging times of post-COVID, we're well placed to keep that investment coming. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief comment around seeing hydrogen actually getting into the mix. Very good to see that opportunity is coming to this and a number of other cities in the country. I think we would all be quite comfortable with acknowledging that it's going to take a range of technologies and opportunities to actually transition to a low-carbon economy. It's really nice to see this coming into the mix as well. So look forward to developments there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And with that, we'll now vote on this motion. That is carried unanimously. Move to item number 7, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of June. I will move the confirmation, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Is there any comment on that? There being none, I'll now invite you to vote. Thank you. That is carried unanimously. We'll move to item number 8, page 21, and that is the summary report of the Quarterly Economic Monitor, and we have Peter Crawford and Linda. This report can be taken as read, but is there any new information that you want to point out?
Just a very brief update, because it's a report on the June quarter and we've already finished the September quarter, but just today we've got new car registrations data and job ads. Job ads for the region continue to be up on the and for the city, so a 2% increase for the city compared with the February base, but New Zealand is only 90% of the February base, so we're doing well. New car registrations were down slightly in the month, but New Zealand car registrations were down by a quarter. Just a clarification on the events report. It's still a work in progress. Last year we didn't get any information from Manawatu District. The information received this year was just really a download of a whole range of events. It wasn't really sorted. We didn't get a response from Manfield. I only was advised yesterday that the economic impact information provided by Sport Manawatu was the total turnover created by events, not the value-added measure which we normally use. So there is a difference between the numbers they've provided and what the council events team has provided. So that has tended to inflate the Sport Manawatu managed funds events. So there's still some work to improve reporting in that area.
Thank you, Peter. Question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Peter. It's a question around the residential consents. So I understand that Kāinga Ora now are not consenting through council. Is that correct?
That was what I was told by the consenting team earlier this year, and so I contacted Kāinga Ora to see if they would start sending us their event consents information, but they had found the process of getting accreditation more difficult than they had expected. And so we are still receiving consents from them, but they are going to be in the process of consenting them themselves once they've completed that. Because all the councils have to go through that accreditation process, but I don't think officials had understood the challenges.
Okay, so for the time being, the Kāinga Ora figures are included in these figures.
Yes.
And at such time that they become accredited to do their own consents, you've contacted them so that those figures can be included in our report?
Yeah, so that they will be included in the Statistics New Zealand data, but for the reporting that the planning team have to do for the National Policy Statement, they're wanting to see the individual consents, and the consenting manager advised that it was always their plan that they would be distributing that information to councils once they start doing that.
Okay, that's good to hear. So in terms of residential consents, for the June year, and in fact the June quarter, they were very much increased. Is that trend continuing this quarter?
No, the last 2 months have been down a little bit. And I'm not quite sure what's driving that, but it was a particularly big quarter because we had Papioia, we had some Bupa consents, and also the Wallace consent. So it was always, if you look at the graph, it's gone through little peaks and dropped off a little bit and then continued on. But we're certainly still well short of what we need.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Peter and Linda. Peter, it's really just to follow up the comment you made about event data, with noting particularly the problems with the Sport Manawatu data not being drawn in the same way as the City Council data, and then following on in your report that we don't do economic impact assessments for several other categories of events. So my question is around how are we looking to improve our data collection and therefore our analysis across that economic impact of events?
The events team has been looking at moving to a new platform for event analysis, online process with a lot more tools, and so that will be that the company that manages that has agreed that organisations like Sport Manawatu will be able to use that to supply information. Sasha, yeah.
The GM to contribute.
Just to assist, we've moved to Fresh Info, which is an organisation that's looking into not only economic benefit but also social benefit, which is a really important factor in events as well. So we've undertaken to contract them for the next year over the events that we can do this analysis. So to date, in particular, we're looking at also free events as well. So free events that it's a bit easier to manage or understand the economic benefit when there's a event, but also free events also provide a lot of social benefit and economic benefit to the city. So we're doing quite a bit in that regard and will be in place for this year.
So can I just follow that up to ask how that will be included in this reporting, or is that a separate focus of reporting through council?
Will be used for creating the report for 3 years' time. But, and there's quite a strong focus in the Fresh Info model on cost benefit. So what's the cost versus the benefit it brings to the community and economy.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Following on from Councillor Bowen, on page 41, the title, sorry, wait till you get it. Unfunded events held at Arena, CET Arena. It's just the title, unfunded events. I don't think you actually mean unfunded events, do you?
Well, they're ones we haven't given grants to.
Yeah,
You know,
so
they do benefit from
it's
the council funding for...
They actually get ticket sales, so this is what we actually receive from the ticket sales for CET Arena. Is that correct? So
No, this is CET's Arena's estimate of the economic benefit those events bring here.
Yeah. So the wording unfunded events held at CET Arena, it doesn't really make any sense.
Well, we can word it differently, but they're the other events listed are ones that council has given grants to enable them to occur.
Thank you. And just another thought, do we get any information on what we offer to the community, which I think is where Councillor Bowen was going, on what we offer to the community of who uses Arena and don't pay? So we don't actually see in a spreadsheet who uses the Arena and don't actually pay. I don't see that anywhere. I don't know if we're going to see that, but is there any of us of usage of Arena and actually don't pay?
I understood that's usually reported separately by Arena in terms of their total community use.
Just we've had questions asked for us for the long-term plan, that was all.
Sorry, just a moment. So you're wanting some clarity around that, is it?
Yeah, we've definitely had questions asked of us for the long-term plan.
Okay, that might fall outside of the scope of this
Okay,
committee, but do you want to respond to that? Yes, thank you.
It's all right. Sorry, Mr Chair, I'm not sure what committee it goes to. There isn't a report that that committee it goes to, so sorry about that.
That's fine. I think that information can be circulated. Sasha, great. Thank you. Right, there don't seem to be any other questions, so thank you, Peter. Oh, no, Councillor Dingwall? There we go.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Peter and Linda. Just looking at page 36, there was a note there around the health enrolments and the way that data collected around that has changed a wee bit. And I'm just wondering if now that the way that the data is being collected, would that start to look at people who might be living in Palmerston North but not necessarily enrolled in a GP here, or enrolled in GPs in Fielding, for example, like myself, or people who are not sort of connected with a local GP but end up showing up to the hospital or emergency places? Would that data start to cover those figures?
The PHO publishes data for the number of enrolments by local authority. But Infometrics works with the Ministry of Health to pull that data out by residential address. So the number of people registered for a Palmerston North practice is higher than our total population because many of the commuters choose to register here and see, a medical service during the week. But the total number of people registered and across all the PHOs is less than the total population. So the Infometrics estimate is 81,400 people were enrolled, but the Statistics New Zealand estimate is that there were 89,000 people back in June last year. So one of the reasons for using it was we've lost access to timely overseas migration data, and it's just an alternative for trying to estimate population growth, but there's always a delay between people coming and registering with a medical practice, particularly amongst younger people who don't see a doctor for a long time. And so the registered population is always less than the number of people living here.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Peter and Linda. There is a recommendation in the papers which I'm happy to move, seconded by Councillor Harbour. And in doing so, just want to make a brief comment that this report data is city-centric, and that's a particular change that this committee had asked for in terms of the infometrics being purely targeted to the city, but within the context of a regional and national framework. There have been a number of questions this morning around the events aspect to the report, and I think it's really good to note that this is a start. My tally, I think, conservatively though, is that the regional impact was just shy of 40 million based on what was listed here, but there are some events, for example, Festival of Cultures, where that's not gathered because it's a community event. So I think we've made a good start, but there are obviously a few other aspects that could inform this report. So I'm pleased that officers will take that on board. And Councillor Harbour quite rightly has indicated in terms of the usage of a council venue that currently that's not captured anywhere. So it's important that that information is captured. Are there any other comments? If not, I'll invite us to vote. That is carried unanimously. We'll move to item number 9, which is the updating of the sector profiles. And Peter, I understand that you are standing in for Julie this morning.
Yes, unfortunately, Julie's been off work for the last 3 days. So there is a PowerPoint presentation just to provide a brief overview of the sectors.
Thank you.
Just to provide a context for why we've got the profiles, this is a snapshot of industry sector data. The industry sector data is only one way of looking at sectors, but this is the easiest way to gather information. The ranking from top to bottom is from smallest to largest in terms of how much people earn from earnings, salaries and wages, and self-employment income, and the length of the bars is the growth in earnings over the 18-year period from 2000 to 2018. So you can see it's fairly consistent, but there's some exceptions there. Education in 2011 was our largest sector, but that's now been overtaken by healthcare and social assistance and public administration and safety, which is where the Defence Force sits. Now, I've only included, I've done this based on Palmerston North data because some of those large sectors in Manawatu District, Statistics New Zealand won't publish the data for confidentiality reasons. And so at the moment, logistics is fourth, but I expect when the data for 2019 is published, it will have moved into third position. So really we're focused on, really from manufacturing to healthcare as the key sectors, but there's also been a focus on which sectors are going to attract growth into the region rather than just respond to growth. And so just really want to run through, this is the infographics that's the design team's now built into the new profiles. I've just been really pleased with what the design team's now doing. So it's primarily a sector that responds to growth, but we are seeing that increased export of housing to other areas. We now have 4 companies producing relocatable houses here for distribution around the lower North Island, and it is going to be a significant growth sector for us over the next 10 to 15 years just because of the vast amount of construction work that's underway. Education and training, it's been one of our weaker sectors in terms of growth, but it was interesting when I started the work on the profiles, how many companies, even in sectors like logistics, said one of the reasons we chose Palmerston North is because of the university and other tertiary education opportunities here. And so it is actually quite important in terms of those other sectors, but for demographic reasons, because the younger population isn't growing as fast as the older population, it isn't one of our fast-growing sectors. Now, government is one that cuts across all those industry sectors, and for the first time, at the end of last year, we actually managed to get Statistics New Zealand to provide us with some information on jobs and earnings by the nature of the organisation and whether it was government-owned or government-controlled. And so that's been really useful. 17,000 jobs, over $1 billion in salaries and wages paid in the city that comes through government organisations. And it's been a very strong sector because of defence, consolidation here, but also public administration. Over 1,000 people involved, employed in NZTA, immigration, IRD, all those study-linked key organisations that have grown their activity here. Healthcare, social assistance, over 8,000 employees, getting close to $500,000 in terms of total earnings. Some real opportunities here in the future through sort of more regionalisation of health services across some of the smaller DHBs, and a lot of data showing sort of growth in the number of people coming here that have health conditions or disabilities. Palmerston North's a great place in terms of the health services offered, but also a compact, easy to get around city, and so that's actually adding to the pressure on our housing sector at the moment. We're seeing more people shifted out of the Wellington region, partly because they're really struggling to find space to build housing down there. And so I'm aware that winds are actually shifting more people here, and so that's adding to that pressure on our social housing. Logistics, 10% of our workforce, 11% of earnings. It was interesting when we did the first profile, the mayor at the time, John O'Naylor, was queried by someone outside the council why we were supporting the logistics sector, because he saw it as a low-wage sector. But if you look at the earnings versus the share of the workforce, it actually brings in a lot of income. The earnings share is actually, and so it's not necessarily the hourly rate that's important, but how many hours people work, and a sector with full-time employment. And those truck drivers earn quite a lot of money from what they do. It's been growing significantly faster than the growth rate for New Zealand, and Kiwirail offers a lot in terms of what it could bring to the city over the next 30 years. Just added this snapshot from the earnings data. This is data we purchased from Stats New Zealand for the 20 largest local authorities. 177% growth in earnings over that 18-year period, compared with the average 121% for New Zealand. Timaru's very high rate of growth, and a lot of that relates to the Canterbury earthquakes and the damage to Littleton, although it looks like Port Chalmers has also been struggling, so Dunedin's growth has been quite weak. Hamilton's been promoting their inland port for about 10 years, but has only managed to grow about the same rate of growth as New Zealand. Manufacturing, it wasn't a growth sector for us, and has experienced decline as import protection was removed. We had Rolter, Sunbeam, even manufacturing right up into the early 2000s. But over the last 6 years, it's begun to show some very strong growth. And if you look through the sectors that are here, there are very strong links to agriculture and construction that are helping to drive that growth. So that's just a very quick overview. We're making progress on updating the others. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Peter. We have a question from Councillor Finlay.
Peter, it interested me to hear that the government is bringing people on benefits from Wellington up to Palmerston North. Are they going into housing corp houses straight away, ahead of local people?
Or some of the emergency housing. Some of there's no emergency housing down there, and sometimes we've had places that's part of the movement.
So there is...
Sorry, can I just check the relevance to sector profiles?
Well, he mentioned that they're doing that, so I'm just wondering why they're doing it.
Okay.
Was Peter that mentioned it? And how do you have any numbers? How many of the numbers that it's happening to?
No, I haven't got actual numbers. I became aware of it through my son who works for Winds and Lower Hutt, but Michael Duinton and I met with a government sector housing group here early August, and they confirmed it was happening, but they didn't actually have actual numbers. But the Wellington and the Hutt have really significant challenges in terms of actually finding land to build new housing.
Thank you. I'll just wait for comments. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Peter. Just a question looking ahead. You say you're going to do a research and development profile, and just wanting to understand the scope of that. There's obviously some organizations in the city that, you know, are first and foremost research organizations, things like plant and food research, it's in the name. But other sectors like the manufacturing sector may have R&D units within their business. Are we going to be picking up both those research organizations as well as the R&D component within the other parts of the economy in that profile?
For that one, we rely for some of it on estimates from the Statistics New Zealand business R&D survey that they do every year, and apportion that to Palmerston North based on our employment in those sort of mostly key manufacturing sectors. But we do have the actual data for the research institutes. And then we ask Massey to provide their breakdown of employment and earnings for the university sector. That's the biggest component, and then there's around 1,000 people employed in research organisations, and then we just have to apportion the Statistics New Zealand data for the other sectors. And
just to check then, the Stats New Zealand data is relevant to small, medium enterprises?
It covers all businesses, yeah.
Right, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Peter. There are no further questions. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Peter. Peter, can you come back, please? You haven't escaped yet. Just on, well, first of all, thank you for your presentation and the work done here. It's really heartening to see that where things are going. Just with the construction one, I find it quite interesting, and just would like your views. On page 51 of our report, attachment 1, item 9, talks about the construction executive summary there. It says activities not included in the construction sector: steel, concrete, bricks and aluminium windows. So if they're not part of the construction sector, where are they?
It's based on an international classification, and then Australia and New Zealand have developed their subsectors within that. Manufacturing is based on the transformation of product. You know, so you bring in, now you could say housing is doing that as well, but it doesn't actually change the physical nature of the products. As construction assembles them together, whereas construction is about bringing in sand, cement, water, and turning it into a new product. So it's really, the reason I listed it is saying, well, if these are all part of the manufacturing. The paradox is building a house on site, in a yard, is counted as a manufacturing activity, but you buy a plot of land and build a house on it is defined as construction.
So where do these, and they're fairly significant, products or sectors themselves, where do they fit then? Do they go into manufacturing, do they?
Yeah, nearly all of these, the only ones that are outside are the last three: architectural services, surveying, engineering design, which are part of that professional services.
Okay. So where does wood fit then?
Wood processing or manufacturing.
Okay.
And so the companies that are making those trusses and the framing, that's a manufacturing activity that's then driven to the plant. And so in the manufacturing profile, I've noted those links to construction, but also processing of product grown in the region.
Okay, well, I'm glad you can explain it, because it does seem somewhat odd, Mr. Chair, that, things that make buildings and structures and that aren't included in construction. I mean, I agree that you're just the messenger, but it does seem strange that Stats New Zealand or MB, whoever puts this together, can't connect the dots.
Well, it's actually an international classification. It's not the OECD, it's another organisation that developed this years ago, and they set the framework, and then Stats New Zealand...
Doesn't mean to say it's right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. There are a couple of recommendations. Is there someone willing to move those? Councillor Beattie, seconded by Councillor Dennison. Councillor Finlay, you indicated you wish to speak. Yes.
Thank you. I was surprised to hear that with the shortage of housing in Palmerston North, which is part of our economic outlook, that and there's waiting list everywhere, that people from Wellington are being brought up to Palmerston North by the government for housing. There was no mention of figures, but I would be very interested to know how many people had been brought up from Wellington to Palmerston North to be housed when we have not got people here. We've got people here who are trying to get into housing, and they obviously come in rebalance. Is there any way of us finding out how many people have been brought up like that?
I think we can perhaps take that offline. You've raised the issue. It does somewhat fall into the previous report content as well, and given the officer had mentioned it in his presentation, I think we'll leave it with officers to bring that information back. Mr. Murphy, is that suitable?
Yep.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Peter. I, again, just compliment the work that's been done here. I reckon it's very important that we see what sectors are doing, and I think it underpins our city's recovery and prosperity, actually, with the diverse economy that's based here. Great to see the construction sector, the government sector, the healthcare and social assistance sector, the logistics sector, which we know is doing well, and the manufacturing. Just on the manufacturing, interesting to note, and I think you touched on it as well, Peter, that niche manufacturing, we've gone from big factories down to smaller plants and factories which provide specialist products connected to, say, the food industry, the agri-tech sector. I mean, we opened a robotics factory here a couple of weeks ago, employing a lot of Massey engineering graduates, so good to see. Obviously connected to the construction sector and even bio-industries like wood and pharmaceuticals, so very good. I think I'll just touch on education, and it's one that we are exposed with, and I just would like to make sure that we've got the oversight over education. International students, which I still feel we're not giving the coverage to, we're missing that. That is a sector that has decreased. It is doing its best to cope in these difficult, challenging times, and I just would like officers and our connected agencies to keep a watching brief on that. It's going to be difficult for some years to come. And it does underpin having the likes of Massey and the CRIs and other tertiary institutions really underpins a lot of the other investment activity and business here. So it's got to be looked at properly. Thank you.
Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr Chair. I just want to echo what the Mayor has said about these sector profiles. It's really great to have them heroed here today. We have got these sectors that are here, and it's also good to hear what Councillor Barrett has said, to see the other ones that aren't here, because we do actually want to see those ones as well when they come forward. When they come, I know that it's a lot of work that's gone into these, and I do thank the officers for all the work that has gone into them. Commend Julie for all the work that she has done, and I know that there is a lot more work to become and to be put into them. So thank you very much to the officers for all the work that has gone into them. But I do really look forward to the rest that are coming forward over time, because I do know that they do take time, but appreciate the work and look forward to the rest that are coming forward. But thank you very much.
And I also want to just acknowledge the work that's been done in this space, because it's this committee that decided that it wanted a refresh of all sector profiles. It had been some time since that had been done, and so you'll recall that we had a particular component in our committee terms of reference around the endorsement of sector profiles prior to publication, and that's exactly what the second recommendation is seeking to do. So I like the fact that we've refreshed them. They're a little bit, I suppose, like not the same, but like a car. The moment you buy one and drive it off the lot, the value changes. I'm not talking about value in this sense, but as soon as you publish this information, the very next day they somewhat become out of date. But nonetheless, it is a good, strong foundation for us to have in front of us. So again, commend the work done in that space. Right, we'll now put these two to the vote. That is carried unanimously. Move to item number 10, which is the International Relations half-yearly update, and Tony Grace. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. Tēnā koe, Mr Chair, tēnā koutou elected members.
Thank you. You can take the report as being read. Is there any additional or new information to add?
No, just one recent event to note which isn't included in the report because it happened post-publication, was a recent event that I think most elected members are aware of that was jointly held between CEDA, Massey University and the International Relations Office around the 5th anniversary of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which was very successful.
Great. Thank you. I'll open up for any questions. Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and thank you, Tony. Here.
Oh, yeah. That's Jonathan.
On your first page, it says that so we are putting some more concentration on relationship building with the countries to which Palmerston has got special economic or strategic partnership interests. So can you name any of the countries which have direct relationship with Palmerston North, especially economic interests?
Yeah, there are several countries around the world, and we're working kind of through the diplomatic corps to identify those. I mean, some examples of those which we are already engaging with that you'll see in the remainder of the report. One recent example is the Vietnamese ambassador and embassy. But we're particularly looking to countries where there are multiple sectors of interest. So, you know, Vietnam's a really good example there because as well as there being education connections through our education providers, there's also research, food and beverage export, you know, agri-tech and science links as well. So really looking at these countries where there's a range of different links and we can bring them here to the city and showcase a lot of different areas, but certainly all around the world. There'd be too many to list.
All right, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thanks, Tony. Another busy report, even though physically not going to see people or people not coming here other than the diplomatic corps. Just with the city's focus on international students, and I just mentioned it before with the education sector, do you know if there's an inter-institution plan for next year or going forward? I know there's real uncertainty, but it'd be interesting to know if the institutions, the universities, the polytechs have a plan.
Yes, so I am aware that CEDA is looking to refresh the international education strategy, which was from 2016 to 2020, and the new strategy is under development. This is something, of course, CEDA themselves, as the lead, would need to speak to in more detail. But that strategic review is timely, not only because the 2016 to 2020 review has naturally come to its end, but also because this process allows the different factors around the COVID impact, and that impact particularly on international education, to be taken into account. And I'm sure you'll hear from that from CEDA in due course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That concludes questions, so thank you for speaking to your report. There are 2 recommendations. Can I have someone to move those? Councillor Petrina, seconded by Councillor Naylor. I'll now open that up for any discussion. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I think our international program's showing its importance and its worth, even in these difficult times, and not being able to travel anywhere or have people, delegations coming to us. We are still digitally connecting with our partners. Tonight I will be with the Taiwanese, and that's another example, and I'll be speaking on behalf of local government in Wellington around our connections city to city, or city to nation in our case with Taiwan, but the importance of engagement even in challenging times. Our focus on business, our trade, but also for us here in the city, international education's really important, but it does flow on to research and flows on to other business networks as well. So it's really important that we do have an inter-institution plan going forward for the city. It's been challenging, and I suspect that people are waiting for levels and government approvals, etc. But we probably should have a plan there, ready to approach things as we can. We're exposed as a city, more so than others, so I would like to see some urgency on that. And I know it's reliant on the institutions, but the city and our agency should be leading that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comment. We'll now vote on this. That is carried unanimously. Item number 11, Councillor Barrett is the portfolio holder for Science, Technology and Innovation, and his report is attached. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for requesting this update and signalling that well in advance. As you will see, colleagues, a brief update here, quite a diverse portfolio scope around science, technology and innovation, but a couple specific goals that we've identified around lifting the profile of science and technology in the community and around improving innovation space and culture in the city centre. Take the report as read and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions? Don't seem to be, so must be doing a good job. Would you like to move the receipt of your report? Thank you. Seconded by the Mayor. Is there any discussion? There being none, then we'll vote on that. And that is carried unanimously. Final item number 12, which is the committee work schedule, page 118 of the order paper. You'll see there that the proposed sector profiles coming to the December meeting are listed there, along with Councillors Finlay and Bowen for their portfolio updates. There's nothing further from the General Manager Are there any questions on the work schedule? If not, I'll move the receipt of the work schedule, seconded by Councillor Harpiter. Any discussion? There being none, we'll put that to the vote. And that is carried unanimously, and with that I will conclude the Economic Development Committee meeting. And Councillor Dennison, we'll take a break for 15 minutes, come back at 11:15. Thanks.
And then he wants to control. I thought you could handle him, but he gets away with you as well.
Well, I think we pin him down as much as we can, and the events team do their best. There comes a point where he works with his clever with the infrastructure.
Oh, he's here.
Yeah, he knows how to make the rules work for him.
Yes.
And I sometimes feel like I'm verging on being rude with the
I'm just going to give that prospectus a bit of a zhuzh up. I just looked at it, it's very dull, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a zhuzh.
Presentation. It's a video, no. Just play on video during Bryce press.
there is a business after 5 at Linton on the 13th of October.
Yeah.
And I can't go because we have the launch of the book.
We okay? Okay, councillors, if I could invite you to take your seats. We'll reconvene our Infrastructure Committee meeting. On to item 2, which was the notification of additional items. There being none. Moves us on to declarations of interest. Are there any? There being none, moves us on to public comment. And again, there is none. So now, confirmation of the minutes. I'm happy to move them. Somebody to second? Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Just note, and it was acknowledged under 28.20, the technical issues that we had with the audio-visual link, and on that item, both Councillor Butt and Councillor Hancock were unable to cast votes, but that's been acknowledged in the minutes, so it's true and accurate. Any other matters arising from the minutes? There be none. Call for a vote. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. That moves us on to item 7, which is the Arena Redevelopment Quarterly Update, and welcome Bryce Hoskins to the table to present. Thank you, Bryce.
Good morning, councillors. I'll take this report as read, with the exception of just a very quick update on where we're at in regards to the Speedway Pits portion. The nature of the project, we are moving quite quickly, so even in the space of 2 to 3 weeks, quite a bit is happening on site. So the first meeting of the year for Speedway is the 24th of October, so in a couple of weeks. The first milestone was to have that portion of the redevelopment completed, and while probably 95% of it will be, we are actually having some discussions with Speedway around them using the car park by Barber Hall for the very first meeting, basically just to give the grass and some of the development sort of soft areas of the Speedway pits a bit more time to sort of settle in and become established. So that's probably just the only thing I'd say to that. And alongside that, there is also a video that I'll quickly play that just sort of shows the extent of some of the works that we're actually been doing on site. It is a little bit old now in terms of some of the work has sort of moved on from here, but it could be a good visual aid to just sort of show the pure extent of things. In case anyone's wondering, the big concrete panels that they were putting down is the foundations for the entrance bridge going from the entrance plaza and connecting up onto the embankment, leading into the Arena 1. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A call for any questions of the report. There being none, it's a very straightforward report. Thank you, Bryce. Everything's on track. And we're quite excited that the Sport Recreation Committee meeting will be held at the arena too, so we'll get to play. Thank you. Play Sport and Rec Committee meeting will be held at the arena later this month. I'll move the recommendations. Look for a seconder. Councillor Hapara. Any comments or debate? There being none, I'll invite a vote. Yep. That vote is unanimous. Thank you. That brings us on to item 8, which is our Infrastructure Capital Works dashboard, and welcome Jeff Snedden to present. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present the Capital Works dashboard for August 2020. I take the report as being read and welcome any questions.
Thank you. Open it up to members if there are questions. Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, some reason my technology wasn't working. So I just had a question around about the percentage of completed work over the year. So in the kind of first sort of graphic, we've got year-to-date actual, but we haven't got year-to-date budget so that we can see how much of the budget we've completed as a percentage, whereas we've got August actual and August budget, if you see what I mean.
Yep. Well, my most up-to-date information that I can give you is that we've completed 20% as the end of September.
Okay, as compared to what amount that was budgeted to be completed by then?
I had that down somewhere. Sorry, percentage is probably a bit difficult, but 15 million budgeted, spent 13.6.
Ah, okay. And that's to the end of September?
End of September.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I just wanted to ask was, in terms of projects like, for example, the dog pound, which isn't individually identified because it's just got planning money in for this year, which of those dashboard things would it come under? Would it come under property?
Yes.
Okay. So if there was any problem with that, we'd expect to see that highlighted in the property one?
Yes.
Okay. And I assume there is no problem with it at the moment. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this report. Just looking at the development-dependent programs that are at risk at the moment, specifically around the Takaro Oriana Reserve Development and the Clearview Reserve Development, are you able to elaborate a little bit more on what the issues are there?
My understanding is basically we're waiting on the developer to undertake the development.
Okay, so, and do we have any sort of timelines or?
We're not able, as infrastructure, we're not able to give you advice on that. I think it's probably more of a planning question about when they're actually going to start activating their consent.
Right, okay. All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Jeff. Just a couple of questions. One, find the page numbers here on this view, it's a little bit tough too. Around the solid waste update area, where you talk about public space bins coming back in there, and there's always a fair bit of chatter around how sufficient our provision is of waste bins and recycling bins in our public places, and just wondered if you could give us any information about where those are going to arrive at.
I'm not able to at this moment, but I can come back to you with an individual, specific answer to that question.
Yep, that'd be great. And I guess a sort of broader question around it, sort of facilities like Heara Katahi, where we had a business case that said there'd be a certain level of use, and we're now enjoying the fact that we're sort of seeing double the use of what was in that business case. Do we sort of adapt our provisioning of things like bins and recycling services to sort of better match the use that our public spaces get, or how do we approach that?
We do respond on the requirements that we see in our public spaces. For example, we put more bins into Streets for People than were there prior to the work happening, mainly because we believed that there were more opportunities and then we were going to encourage more use. So yes, we do, to answer your question. I guess probably what I'd flag to the committee is that there is a lot of pressure on some of our budgets across this year, and we are actively managing things like our bin provision to ensure that we don't exceed the budget allocation. And there are cases where we will not be able to provide bins because we have spent our budget.
Great, thank you. Perfect segue to my other question, which was around the logistics and support, where you talk about the plant and vehicle renewal budget not being adequate to replace all plants. So just that's identified as end of life. So are we planning to just stretch it out and hope that things don't break, or sort of what's the response around that in terms of dealing with that limitation?
Well, the plant and vehicle renewal budget will be spent as required, and yes, there will be plant that will not be able to be replaced in this year, which we will then have to look at next year. But the new LTP gives us the opportunity to come back to council and say this is the program that we have to replace plant and vehicles, along with the glass recycling.
So has the scale of that gap been estimated yet?
Oh, through the LTP process, yes, it has, and it will be coming to council.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other further questions, councillors? I know we just had a little bit of, I do. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your report, Jeff. Jeff, just following on, the recycling trucks that you haven't got budget for, how much money are we out in replacing those?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I can come back to you on that.
So are they critical, like, if we need, they've been budgeted for, so if we defer them, is there going to be impact to our service, or?
I don't believe so, but I will confirm that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. There's no further questions. I'll move that we receive the August 2020 Infrastructure Capital Works dashboard. Seconder, Councillor Naylor. Any comments or debate? Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just wonder, in regards to the Capital Works dashboard, if we could just, if we're going to have the financial overview and the figures of the actuals and the budget, if we could include the actual year-to-date and the budget year-to-date rather than the total budget, because that gives us a much better idea of how we're tracking, which is my understanding of the point of the dashboard is to sort of just check that we're tracking okay.
Yes.
So that would be more useful to have an overview of what's happening.
I think that's well identified. We can capture that. Thank you. Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a bit concerned with the financials and the infrastructure, and I think we're doubling up because, so I think the questions for the financials will need to go to the Finance Committee, so I'll expect answers to these questions there. So I think we've just got to be, it's a fine line. Yes, so I'm just aware that we don't want to double up in meetings.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And with the establishment of the Infrastructure Committee, we've had reports going to Finance on the 3 monthly, quarterly, and these coming to Infrastructure, that there is that overlap, and we're working through on that, but I agree with you on that point. Any other further comments? Otherwise, I'll call for a vote. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Thank you. Moves us on to item 9, which is our last item, the work schedule. One point that I'll just make is from our last meeting, the Deputy Mayor, you raised around the pedestrian crossing, the annual audit, that wasn't captured from that comment onto the work schedule, but we'll transfer that on for future meetings, and that was due in November, was the commitment from the officer. So that'll be an addition. Is there anything else? Thank you, Chair.
No, nothing else that I can add to this week's schedule.
Okay, any questions? I'll move it, seconded by Councillor Beattie, and call for a vote. That's passed unanimously. That concludes our business, so therefore I'll close our meeting.